Today I finished reading this book, Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. Rutger Bregman's recent book, Humankind, A Hopeful History, translated by Elizabeth Manton and Erica Moore, is a book about human nature. But it is more than that. It is also a book about our beliefs about human nature, what informs those beliefs and what those beliefs lead to. So human nature, our beliefs about human nature, where those beliefs come from, and what those beliefs lead to, the interplay between our beliefs about human nature and what we do in our interactions with other people based on those beliefs. He makes a careful and convincing case that our beliefs about human nature have real consequence. Negative views of what we truly are lead to caution, distance, distrust. So thinking that the other person is evil. The consequence of that kind of attitude is that we will be cautious, that we keep our distance. We are distrustful, and our thinking and our actions is not based on real experience, but instead it is based on a cartoon version of what we hold to be true about the other person. In other words, with a negative view of other people, we would be thinking and acting mostly based on stereotypes. By contrast, a positive view tends to be associated with courage. It takes courage to actually go in and observe someone, to deal with who they are, and not to let that interaction be filtered through some kind of prejudice or some kind of theory about the other person. So it is associated with courage, and a positive view also encourages contact and learning about who the other person actually is. And so it gives a chance for developing trust. So what both the positive and the negative views, they both have in common is that they can both serve as self-fulfilling prophecies. So beliefs that because we hold them, we make them come true. That's the nature of self-fulfilling prophecies. Beliefs don't merely arise out of our experience. They can guide, frame, and limit our experience. In that sense, beliefs preserve and protect themselves against countervailing evidence. So Bregman's task in this book, we can divide it into two parts. There are two sides, complementary sides to what Bregman is doing in this book. On the one hand, he is challenging the belief that human nature is essentially evil. And this is what is called the veneer theory. What is a veneer theory? It is the theory, it is a belief that any human goodness, anything good about human nature is accidental. It is temporary, unreliable, and it is an artifact of civilization and culture. So that's the veneer theory. The artifacts are shallow and easily removed. So the veneer, it's a thin layer. Human goodness is a thin layer added to the true human nature, which is evil, selfish, and self-centered. Challenging this theory isn't easy, even though Bregman is doing it, I think, very effectively. But it is not an easy task because the veneer theory has received support, massive support, from a variety of sources, including works of fiction, which have shaped our common sense, our default positions, like Lord of the Flies, historical case studies that have become popularized, like the history of Easter Island, the evils of the Second World War, and the famous demonstrations done by psychologists after the Second World War. So Bregman patiently revisits each of these sources that support the evil nature of human beings. He revisits each source, each study, each of the demonstrations with a fresh perspective. And he questions whether each of those sources, each of those pieces of evidence, he questions whether they can convincingly tell us that human nature is really evil. And he discovers, in that process of investigation, he discovers new information about each case, finding that there's actually ambiguity and inconsistency. So once we examine them from different sides, we find that there is inconsistency and ambiguity in each of them. None of the pieces of evidence look the same after an unbiased investigation. And by unbiased investigation, I mean an investigation that is free from theoretical commitment. Instead, the evidence is often distorted by an existing veneer theory. This is what we find while we are reading this book. What makes this work impressive is that the author does not hesitate to question established authorities and some pseudo-authorities on human nature. Nor does he hesitate to openly revise his own previous positions. So there are multiple occasions in the book where Bregman says, I used to believe this, but I have come to revise my previous belief. So that is, it just shows his commitment to the truth, not to authority or to his own already established commitments. The negative view of human nature, unfortunately, has an advantage over the positive theory, the positive view. It keeps itself distant. So in thinking negatively about human nature, that view keeps itself distant from concrete facts, from people and their actions. And it is reinforced by that very distance. If I don't like my neighbors, then I keep my distance from them, and that distance ensures that I continue to dislike them. Moreover, the observations that confirm the negative view, all the experiences that support the negative view of human nature, all those observations are more salient because we have a natural tendency to pay more attention to negative experiences, to negative observations. Those things grab our attention. They're more effective in grabbing our attention compared to positive experiences, compared to experiences that are inconsistent with that theory. In short, witnessing a conflict, a crime, a bad experience can have a drastic and deep impact on what we think. So here's a quote from the book. When we hole up in our own trenches, we lose sight of reality. We are lured into thinking that a small hate-mongering minority reflects all humankind, like the handful of anonymous internet trolls that are responsible for almost all the vitriol on Twitter and Facebook. End quote. And finally, on top of all those problems, there is also the problem of asymmetric feedback, which Bregman describes as follows. Quote, if your faith in someone is misplaced, the truth will surface sooner or later. So if you trust someone, if you've been too trusting, eventually you find out. But if you decide not to trust someone, you will never know if you're right, because you will never get any feedback. So that's the asymmetric feedback. If you trust someone and you're wrong, you will find out. If you don't trust someone and you're wrong, you will not find out. Through his historical and sociological reviews, Bregman shows how the two opposite sides of the debate provide foundations for drastically different approaches to education, to work, to management of employees, treatments of crime, healthcare, types of prison. One view the negative view is threatened by freedom, by trust, by play and playfulness, and by open-endedness, by regarding human nature as open-ended. While the other side, the positive view, aims to nurture all of those things: freedom, play, playfulness, and open-endedness. There's also a thought-provoking analysis in the book about how strict hierarchies of power are vulnerable to psychopaths. I can't get into that analysis right now. Maybe later on I will. But I invite you to read the book. That is an extremely important point that he makes in the book, that once a hierarchy has formed, only people who cannot feel shame can climb up that kind of hierarchy. So strict hierarchies of power are vulnerable to manipulation by psychopaths. Now, I want to just add a very minor criticism of the book. My overall impression of the book is extremely positive. But parting ways slightly with the author, we might say that the positive view is ultimately, the positive view of human nature is less theoretical than the negative view. Isn't a primary drive behind having theories of human nature the better management of people? So why do we want theories about other people, about human nature at all? Is it because we want to control them? Is it because we want to predict them? And is that a noble motivation to have? Didn't the behaviorists see prediction and control to be the ideal, the ultimate aim of psychological science? We could say, of course, that we have positive theories and negative theories. But it would also be fair to say, I think, that the theoretical position in general, just having any theory or the motivation to have any theory as such, already betrays a lack of trust and a desire to be prepared against surprise. Whether it is good or bad, a theory of human nature imposes itself on humans, restricting and framing our contact with one another. And if it is a good theory, it blinds us towards some observations. If it is a negative theory, it blinds us towards the other countervailing observations. So in either case, it is restricting and framing our contact with reality and with one another. This shows up not only in everyday life, but also in scholarly works reviewed in this book. What makes the villains of this book, so-called villains of this book, including Philip Zimbardo, what makes these villains obnoxious isn't only their beliefs in the inherent evil in us, but their confidence. It is their regard for the question, is human being good or evil? It is the way they regard that question that is annoying and irritating, that does not do justice to human nature. They act as if the question can be answered like a logical or mathematical question. Perhaps a more radical, more fundamental way of opposing these villains of the book would be not to make a case for the goodness of humanity, but instead to embrace the mystery of humanity, the fact that we have a choice and that our being is open to both good and evil. So in closing, I would recommend this book for several reasons. I would especially recommend this book if you have read other books like The Lucifer Effect or books like Sapien, and this would offer a very good complementary view treatment on after reading those books. For several reasons, I would recommend this book. Above all, the most important reason is that it takes a fresh perspective on an old question, and it refreshes our view and invites us to think again about who we are, reminding us that there is a question. But also, I would also recommend this book because it urges us to be responsible for how we respond to that question, to examine and adopt our positions responsibly, with an awareness that there are, in fact, consequences to what we hold to be true. All right. Thank you very much for your attention.